Dr. Joe doesn't want to take the blame, but I think she requested the readings. And I'm running out of stories, but this is one I just wrote, so I hope you enjoy it. This started, by the way, many, many years ago. Okay. If it's too loud, let me know. Maybe they don't want to hear me. Okay. This started many, many years ago when my children were small, and I made French toast for breakfast in that nice big square Farberware pan that held 4 pieces of bread. So I made 4 slices of toast, and after I had given my husband his, let him rest, his 2, and each of the children 1, there was nothing left for me. So I decided I'd have to fool them, and that's where cream cheese French toast was born. When asked to write a story about food, I realized that one of the advantages of growing older is the collection of wonderful memories I have. For example, I once asked my granddaughter what she would say when people asked what she remembered about her grandmother. I expected her to say something like, oh, she taught me how to knit, or she made the most delicious cream cheese French toast. Instead, she said, my grandmother always had a saying for everything, and her favorite was, anger does not take away love. Of course, this led to the next memory of my grandson, who is now the father of my first great-grandson, when George was about 13 in junior high school. George was taking a cooking class and was preparing for a class demonstration. He asked me if I would watch him make my French toast to make sure he was doing it right. I said I would, and that if he would give me a sample taste, I would give him an honest critique. It was wonderful, of course. George had made it. The next day, George prepared Bubba's, that's me, French toast for the class. When the teacher asked George where he had gotten that wonderful recipe, George proudly said, oh, that's the one thing my grandmother makes well. To this day, it is still one of their favorite breakfast meals. I have even gotten the breakfast chef at the 5-star senior residence where I live to make it once in a while. And this is the recipe for Grandma's cream cheese French toast. You spread cheese on 2 slices of whole wheat bread, because they don't know the difference between whole wheat and brown. You know, they both come out brown, so we start with whole wheat. Spread cheese on 2 slices of whole wheat bread and put them together to make a sandwich. Beat 1 egg and add a little milk. Dip the sandwich into the egg mixture to coat it, and then fry the coated sandwich in a small amount of butter in a small frying pan. Eat and enjoy. I'm going to now introduce our next speaker, Janet Smith, who has her own story to tell.
But this is not my story. Somebody else will read my story. So this is called annual lasagna. Every April, she gets a year older. Every April, there's a party for her, attended by people celebrating that accomplishment. In this case, the party girl is not taken out. Rather, the party is brought to her. Picture this. The decorated table and enough chairs for 8 people set up right next to her bed, in the same spot where her own grandmother's dining room table stood years ago. This birthday girl, in fact, lives in the dining room. Colorful balloons are tied to the hospital bedside rail, and happy birthday swags are hung on the walls. This annual birthday celebration occurs at lunch and is never catered. The food is not taken out of package. Rather, this meal features the labor of a multi-course house home-cooked meal for the guest. The birthday girl doesn't sit at the table with us or share the same food. Depending on her health, some years she sits in her wheelchair, and some years she is propped up with pillows in bed. right there in her grandmother's dining room. At every birthday party, her hair is newly dyed and she's dressed in a colorful new dress which matches the balloons. Bev, her long-standing caregiver, gets her all dressed up as if she has somewhere to go. This homebound birthday party each April features hearty, healthy foods, which always includes Sicilian lasagna made by her son, the party organizer. Despite the fact that the birthday girls can't sit at the table or eat with a fork, she is honored by no slouch of a party. The guests celebrate the day of her birth in the distant past, as well as her present-day longevity, with the simple gift of a home-cooked meal, in honor of getting 1 year older. And now, Mary Ellen DeVito.
Thank you. Okay. This is a story told to me by our friend Janet. When Janet was 12 years old, her mother emigrated to the United States. In Jamaica, there were many families like hers, where moms or dads had to work outside the country to support the family. The act of leaving in order to strengthen a family's resources was a powerful act of love and sacrifice, but to 12-year-old Janet, it represented its own challenges. As the eldest daughter, the duty of care for Janet's 2 siblings and father fell to her. This, of course, included preparing meals for her family. At 12 years old, her experience was limited, but she devised a schedule to provide structure and routine to the task. She decided to prepare soup on Tuesdays and Saturdays. Tuesday's soup was heavy and hearty, the kind of soup that sticks to the ribs. On those days, she assembled the soup as she had seen others do: beans, pigeon peas, or gungu, as it is called in Jamaica, a small piece of cured meat like pig's tail or neck bone, and whatever vegetables she could get at the Saturday morning farmer's market, shopping as she had with her mother in earlier days. Saturday's soup was a thinner soup, chicken or beef, just enough to flavor because meat was expensive, with vegetables and maybe some pumpkin. The other days were a mixture of things, a sandwich or curry. Since most of Janet's early food memories have to do with developing recipes and routines on her own out of necessity, it didn't occur to her that she would have a recipe to share that was uniquely her mother's. Yet suddenly, somehow, during our discussion, the memory was triggered of her mother's world-renowned fruitcake, steamed, not baked. Janet told me that people would clamor over this delicacy, over which her mother labored mightily and proudly. Janet recalls that toward the end of the summer months, her mother would soak currants, nuts, raisins, and orange peel in Jamaican white rum. By November, the baking began. Cake batters were mixed, poured into covered baking tins, and placed in boiling water in a large zinc container, a stone on top to keep them in place as they steamed. That's quite a memory. That's quite a memory. The end result was moist and delectable. Black cake, which her mother mailed to her sisters, brothers, and other family members at home and abroad, to England and other parts of Europe. Janet beamed while sharing this account. Her face brightened, her smile widened, and the whole conversation became more animated. I detected more than a hint of pride in the telling, and we both could taste that cake as though it was sitting on the table between us. Some of us cherish memories of deeply nurturing culinary traditions, and others remember loved ones who couldn't cook, wouldn't cook, or simply couldn't be there to cook. Yet even in these cases, in some quiet moment, a memory emerges, like that fragrant fruitcake, that connects us to our past and to the essential truth of our relationships with all their frailties and strengths.
So we didn't actually hear about who wrote each piece. I am going last because I have the one that is the most special to me. I'm reading one that Mary Ellen wrote. Mary Ellen read one that she wrote, interviewing Janet, and Janet Kleinberg read her own, and what Janet was reading was a gift to somebody who's in this room. So these proved to be much more difficult than we thought, because I said I'm going to write about my mother and cookies and ice cream at the end of her life. And then I started calling people and saying, could you write for me? Could you write for me? And by the time 4 people said, this is way too heavy, I can't do it, I don't have a story, I also realized that I could not write about my mother and cookies and ice cream. So I had to write about somebody else. But Mary Ellen wrote a very emotional piece about her mother, which is why I'm going to read it, and I'm not sure I may cry. Okay. This is the world in a tiny leaf. If you've ever read Proust's Remembrance of Things Past, you will understand where I'm going with this. Proust's narrator takes a bite of a Madeleine and is instantly transported to another time and place in which he reunites with all the characters and places and events of his faraway past. Indeed, Proust was able to write 7 novels using the rich imagery of that one food memory evoked. So it is with me and basil. I don't know exactly what it is. I'm still analyzing the swirl of pungent memories arising from a single whiff of basil. Rubbing a leaf vigorously, I nearly swoon from a scent so potent as to bring on a tumble of images, words, faces, and feelings. The most prominent memory that springs into consciousness is of my grandmother, mustachioed but kind and loving. 4'11", but a giant in my esteem. She was the gardener, the keeper of the basil and tomatoes, grand conjurer of string beans and Swiss chard. We ate well in that time. When she was with us, our young bodies nourished by green growing things, stirred in big pots smelling of sauce and basil, always basil. She was tiny and had to reach up to drop the ingredients into the steam. That's one of the many instantaneous images basil prompts. My tiny, round-bellied, Italian-accented, smiling, kind, wonderful grandmother cooking for us at the stove in our kitchen. There are other images in other places. Our country shack outside of Princeton in an enclave of Italian immigrants, each having brought the others, surrounded by farms and silos, my numerous siblings running around unkempt and half-naked, playing in the wholesome dirt. Being bathed in a wooden tub under the hand pump in the yard. Italian neighbors visiting under the grape arbor, the smell of espresso mingling with the sweet tang of Concord grape, drinking spring water straight out of the earth from a giant ladle. My grandparents farmed there, growing the usual crops needed to make minestre, or minestrone, giambota, or vegetable stew. Although my siblings might recall things differently, I trust my memories. The knock over the head I get when I smell those ingredients converging in a pot tells me they can't be false. Finally, the memory most cherished is of my own small-statured mother. Long after my grandmother had left us, surveying the garden, smelling this herb or that, wearing her silly straw hat, she always had basil stuffed into her shirt pocket so she could smell it all day. I see her, still young but now aging, Earth Mother, makeup-free yet so beautiful to me, as she connected with all that her mother and her peasant ancestors knew to be valuable. She reaches for basil, brings it to her nose, and crushes it between her fingers. The look on her face says what I now know. This is the world in a tiny leaf. So these are very difficult. The CareGivers Project and My Mother's Recipe is a safe place to cry. We do it every time we have these. That's what it's about. We have to use these stories we tell to others so that they know our story. We use them to reflect on ourselves as we're writing them and as we're hearing them read. And this is the work we want to go on and do. We just had our website redone. All the money that we raised from previous My Mother's Recipes, thanks to sponsors, has gone into that, and we will contact all of you guys directly to see how we can help bring that up and spread that out. So now, shall we turn to the raffle? Oh, put your tickets in the basket.